Hey there, this is Bradley Jackson with the Tennessee Chamber and Tennessee Manufacturers Association. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here today at our roadshow event of 2021. In prior years, all of our roadshow events we've had in person, but we appreciate you all being patient with us as we have tried to go around the state. Today, we're actually at the Memphis Agri Center, so we want to thank them for hosting us there. Susie, Carolyn, I know another of others are there in Memphis. Memphis is such a tremendous asset to Tennessee for logistics, manufacturing, so many things. So part of our work today is to really highlight, West Tennessee and the work that they've done, especially in the EV area with the recent announcement of Ford and Blue Oval City, which we'll kind of be talking a little bit more about today. I do want to thank our sponsors, Walmart and LBMC. And to kick us off, I want to introduce Ed Vlasic, who's currently CEO of Lasco Products. Lasco is certainly no stranger to any of us. We see their products all over. And they were founded in 1906. They're the largest provider of portable fans and heaters in the United States. They design, manufacture, assemble, and distribute products which are sold in North America, South America, and Asia. They also manufacture air purifiers, products under the Guardian brand. Ed, prior to joining Lasco, he was a private equity strategies manager, a senior vice president, and has held a number of other jobs. And Ed, we thank you so much for joining us here today.
Well, thanks, Bradley. And a big thank you to Walmart for thinking of Lasco to be part of its roadshow during the October Manufacturers Month. Finally, a thanks to the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce for organizing the event and for collaborating with its established chamber member Walmart to include Lasco. As Bradley said, Lasco is more than a century-old U.S. manufacturer of home comfort appliances and has a long-standing relationship with Walmart. In fact, Walmart was Lasco's first mass merchant retailer partner almost 45 years ago. Both companies have come a long way since then. Walmart has grown to be the largest retailer in the world, and Lasco is a global leader in home comfort. Lasco also is the North American leader in domestically produced box fans, which many of you may have purchased for your child as they went to school this year, as well as portable heaters and air purifiers, an assortment of other air moving products, many of which are sold to consumers from a shelf in their local Walmart store. And like so many other U.S. companies, much of our success can be attributed to our partnership with Walmart and Sam's Club. As Lasco has expanded over the years, it's increased its U.S. manufacturing base since the early 1960s by opening its fan production facility in the city of Franklin, Tennessee, just a few hours east of y'all in Memphis. In addition, Lasco operates production and distribution facilities in Fort Worth, Texas, and West Chester, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, and distribution centers in Euclid, Ohio, and Reno, Nevada. We proudly employ over 1,000 Americans across the United States, and we are actively looking for more people to work in Franklin and throughout the U.S. Much of this growth has its roots in Lasco's partnership with Walmart and the ever-increasing consumer demand for affordable, quality products. Lasco supported Walmart's Made in America initiative. In fact, the #1 best-selling box fan sold at Walmart is made right here in Tennessee. Our campus in Tennessee spans almost 100 acres in Franklin. We employ about 400 Tennesseans. And in addition to our factory and distribution center, we have various other companies that operate businesses in our property, including Binks Outfitters, Habitat for Humanity, several churches, and some small businesses. Our green space provides community soccer fields for youth leagues in Franklin, Tennessee. And over the years, Lasco has become an integral part of this Middle Tennessee community, and we look forward to a continued and growing presence in the state. Our partnership with Walmart extends beyond simply a supplier and a retailer. The relationship is collaborative and is most effective when the two companies join forces. Our current joint efforts with Walmart are dedicated to address the tariffs our federal government has imposed on various imports and on finding solutions to provide the best value to Walmart customers, despite unprecedented market cost headwinds and supply chain challenges. I want to personally thank Walmart for its continued support during these difficult times and for working with us to overcome these challenges. Both companies remain totally committed to employing Americans and providing affordable US designed and manufactured products for our consumers. I really want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. And now I'll turn it back to Bradley, who will introduce the next speaker.
Right. Thank you very much, Ed. We greatly appreciate LASCO, your engagement here in Tennessee, contributing greatly to our economy. First, going to kick it off. We're going to go to Drew Fry to talk about something that's extremely relevant to all of us, and that is electric vehicles. I know whenever Governor Bill Lee last week announced the Blue Oval project in West Tennessee, occupying the regional Memphis mega site there. A lot of us were very excited. We know that has been a project long in the works. We keep hearing about from our automotive manufacturers about how much EVs are going to change, automotive manufacturing, whether it's supply chains, raw good and materials. There's so many aspects. So we're happy to welcome Drew Fry with us here today, who leads the development of TVA's electric vehicle program. He coordinates and works on partnerships with the development of EV stakeholders and regional local power companies to remove market barriers, allowing EV adoption in the Tennessee Valley. So Drew brings a great perspective from us. For us, he graduated from the University of Chattanooga and also the University of Tennessee and has a mechanical engineering degree and also a degree in power systems engineering. So Drew, I will turn over to you and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen and get us going here. All right, can you hear me all right? See the screen? I'll look at Bradley to give the thumbs up. He's shaking his head. Perfect. So thanks for having me this morning. As Bradley said, I am Drew Fry with TVA. I work in our electric vehicles program. So I'm the electric vehicle guy. So full disclosure, I'm not the economic development guy. We have a lot of great folks on our team that work every day to bring more jobs and investment to the Tennessee Valley, whether that is automakers or whether that is other products. And so I work closely with those folks and provide them information on what we're doing with electric vehicles. And we're excited to see all the announcements across the state and across the Southeast associated with electric vehicles and the benefits that that brings to the Tennessee Valley. And so today I'm going to talk about a little bit about the electric vehicles and the market, how it's developing and the technology, and really kind of the benefits that that brings to us, specifically kind of the economic development impacts in the state of Tennessee. So we like to say that, the electric vehicle sales are growing from a small number, but incrementally growing. So the turning point for EV adoption is getting closer and closer. And this is really driven by the technology associated with electric vehicles. So the technology getting better, the batteries inside of them getting cheaper, but also the vehicles that automakers are making and bringing to the market. And we'll talk about that in a few slides. But on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the EV sales in the United States. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the EV sales in the TVA region. And you'll see these are quarter numbers. So really the last year, the uptick in EV sales, which has been very interesting given everything going on in the supply chain with vehicles themselves. And if you've been shopping for a vehicle lately, like I have, you'll know that the options are very slim as automakers are dealing with the microchip shortage. But this represents a compound average 49% year-over-year growth over the last couple of years. So trending in the right direction in the US and in the TVA region. I think everyone has heard at least about the Ford announcement last week, and these slides are actually Ford announcement, but you have every major automaker making commitments to aggressively pursue electric vehicles. and whether that is, actually giving up on building combustion engines or setting some kind of sales target for how many vehicles they're going to sell with electric. And this is really in response to regulation and legislation all over the world. So if you look at European countries, if you look at China, other countries, they have some very strict rules about and aggressively pursuing electric vehicle adoption. And so these automakers, they typically play in the global market. So you look at a Volkswagen and a Nissan and a Toyota, they're very interested in being able to sell vehicles around the world. And so every major automaker has some kind of announcement. They usually come with a B for billion in investment. And as we talked about, last week, Ford announced they'll be investing about $6 billion outside of Memphis there to build Blue Oval City. And so we'll talk about what that sort of means as a site and how these automakers are going about building out their supply chain for the equipment that goes into electric vehicles. But just know that every major automaker is looking at something in the next 5 to 10 years to aggressively push electric vehicles. And what we're really excited about and what we think will actually increase EV adoption greatly is the vehicles that they are electrifying. Over the last 10 years or so, there were several, small, subcompact, hatchback or sedan electric vehicles you could choose from, like a Nissan Leaf or a Chevy Bolt. But really kind of going forward, we're looking at electric vehicles of all shapes and sizes, as many as 100 new EV models being introduced by 2025. And the big ticket items like SUVs, crossover SUVs and full-size SUVs, but pickup trucks like the F-150 electric, like the Chevrolet or Hummer equivalent of their electric pickup trucks. And so we're really excited, and we're really excited that several of these are going to be built in Tennessee. So, Ford will be building a plant for the F-150. The Cadillac Lyriq will be made in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and the Volkswagen ID4 will be made here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I live. And so we're really excited that a lot of these are going to be made right here in the Tennessee Valley. We think that the advantages are becoming more clear to consumers. So, the very first early adopters of electric vehicles were really kind of innovative leaders. They liked the technology. They maybe had some environmental aspirations behind being able to drive an electric vehicle. But what we're seeing right now is it's all about fun and cool. So, the Teslas, the Cadillacs, the Ford Mach-E's, all of those kinds of things. Electric vehicles are just fun to drive. And when people get in them and drive them, being able to instantaneously accelerate off the line, no gear changes, people just really like it. Some people are interested in the fuel economy. It's equivalent to over 100 miles per gallon if you want to, equate it to our typical MPG numbers. But that really equates to a very efficient vehicle. And you think about that in terms of electricity at your home, you can save up to $1,000 a year by using what is less than $1 per gallon equivalent gas in electricity. And so, some consumers are really looking at that. And beyond just the numbers, as we continue to deal with gas shortages and sort of the uncertainties around that, I think there was a lot of recognition during our last little gas shortage that, hey, some of these electric vehicles running around here don't have to deal with this. They don't have to sit in line and take a gas can to the gas pump and try to get their gasoline. So the charging can be very convenient. 80 to 90% of the charging is done at home, in your garage, in your driveway, which is super cheap, super convenient. And only kind of 20 to 10% is done using the public charging network. And so there's a lot of work to be done on the public charging network. I'll talk about that in a few slides. But in general, it's very inexpensive and convenient to charge an electric vehicle. And kind of one of the things that we'll talk about here today is on the maintenance side. and what goes into an electric vehicle. So for a combustion engine vehicle, ICE, internal combustion engine, there are over 2,000 moving parts that go into that vehicle. Compare that with about 20 moving parts in an electric vehicle. So you're really switching out a lot of mechanical moving parts for a lot of electrical components and not moving parts. And so that is going to translate into big savings on the operation and maintenance side. So just as an example, I've had an electric vehicle for a little over 2.5 years. And the only thing I've done to that vehicle in terms of maintenance is I ran over a screw, and so I had to get new tires. So I won't put that on the electric vehicle, but I got new tires and I added wiper fluid. Those are the only 2 things I've done in 2.5 years. And so, what does that mean for companies that manufacture, traditional gasoline vehicle parts, suppliers to the automakers? What does that mean in the future? We'll talk about that in a few slides. So TVA has been a supporter of electric vehicles for many years because of the benefits that they can bring to our region and to our consumers. So we have a goal with other EV stakeholders to bring 200,000 electric vehicles to the Tennessee Valley by 2028. For reference, there are about 20,000 EVs on the road now, so we're adding a 0. But we kind of use that as a target because of the huge benefits associated with it. If you have 200,000 EVs on the road, each year you'll save over 1 million metric tons of CO2. That's over 1 million acres worth of trees. You will reinvest over $120 million into the local economy. So instead of paying for gasoline, instead of sending your money to outside of the region to oil refineries or outside of the United States where some oil and gasoline products may come from, over $120 million stays local, going to local power companies in the local community. Again, a lot of these electric vehicles will be made here in Tennessee and the Tennessee Valley. And so that is reinvesting into our local communities. And another very cool part is that over $200 million will stay right in consumers' pockets. Instead of paying for gasoline, instead of paying for maintenance, that stays in your pocket that you can reinvest in buying more things or saving or paying off loans. Really a benefit to the consumers that we serve. So to encourage more electric vehicles on the road, TVA has come up with kind of a 4-prong strategic approach. And this is really about removing the market barriers that our consumers face when they're thinking about buying an electric vehicle now. So we worked with EV stakeholders from across the region, talking to a lot of consumers, talking to automakers, charging companies, state agencies, utilities, kind of you name it. We came up with a lot of interesting things that we could do to encourage the market, but they all fell into 4 big buckets, 4 big market barriers. And those 4 things are charging infrastructure, the range anxiety and the fear of not having a charging station when you need to drive to grandma's house or when you want to go to the beach, being able to drive your EV everywhere you want to drive it. The vehicles themselves, a lot of folks saying, I'm just not interested in a sedan. I want a pickup truck. I want an F-150. And so, partnerships with automakers and commercial fleets, how can we bring more of those types of electric vehicles to our region so we can support a wide range of EVs for consumers? Supportive and innovative policies. So whether those policies are at the federal level or the state level or the city level, or at utility companies like TVA and the local power companies. What can we do with our own policies, our own rate structures to encourage more investment in our market, more folks building EV charging stations, more companies coming to Tennessee to build electric vehicles, to build batteries? What can TVA and local power companies do in that space? And the 4th really ties them all together. It's just general consumer awareness, helping consumers who might be thinking about buying an electric vehicle get comfortable with the technology, understand what it means, what it doesn't mean, just inform and promote electric vehicles. And so we have a lot of kind of sub-bullets under these, and those are really the programs that me and my team are working on building out to encourage more folks to buy electric vehicles. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of them of some work that we've already done. On the innovative and supportive policy side, back in 2020, the TVA board approved a regulatory policy and a new optional electric vehicle rate. This is really aimed at encouraging investment in the companies that build charging infrastructure, build charging stations across the state and across the region. And so this is a what we think is an economical and stable rate option for private developers of EV charging stations that flows through the local power company, but also allows third-party providers like the charging networks or gas stations or anyone who installs a charging station to be able to price that to consumers as not a regulated electricity rate, but an unregulated price that they can set, and they can set the structure. So similar to how gas stations set the price for gasoline, and no one really regulates that, the state ensures that, you know, when you pay for a gallon of gasoline, you're getting a gallon of gasoline. Similar to that, that's how charging stations will be. So a local power company or an EVgo or a Pilot Flying J can set the price to consumers for EV charging stations, and that won't run afoul of any kind of TVA regulatory work as far as electricity rates go. On the charging infrastructure side, hopefully you've heard about TVA and state agencies and local power companies. We're going to be working together to build kind of the foundational charging network across the entire TVA service territory. So TVA covers parts of 7 states, as you can see on that map there. And we're looking to put fast charging stations at least every 50 miles down the interstates and major travel corridors. So major US and state highways highlighted in blue on that map. Kind of building this first foundational network. This will not be the end all be all of networks. You can see the blue dots on that map are existing charging infrastructure and how they're sort of centered around the major population centers like Nashville and Chattanooga and Knoxville. And so we're really looking at working with local power companies, state agencies like the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation to fill in all of those gaps. So if you want to drive from Bristol to Tupelo or from, you know, Bowling Green down to Birmingham, you have confidence that you won't go, you know, very far before you have a charging station, that you can have those EV road trips. And so we're excited about the first local power companies joining right now, basically in the next few weeks, and starting to develop the first sites along these highways. And TVA is doing a lot of work internally with our own fleet of vehicles. So at the most recent TVA board, we announced that we will be electrifying our own internal fleet of business vehicles. We'll be electrifying 100% of the light duty, so think sedans, trucks like that, and 50% of our medium duty fleet by 2030. So what this means is TVA will be buying more than 1,000 EVs in the coming years as we electrify our own business travel. And so we'll be installing charging stations at TVA facilities. We actually already have a handful of electric vehicles now, over 20 electric vehicles that our employees use. We have charging infrastructure at various TVA facilities. So if I need to go to Watts Bar Nuclear Plant, for example, for a meeting, that I have charging stations when I get there and charging stations when I get back to drive my electric vehicle. And we're going to be working with our local EV manufacturers on the types of vehicles that we buy. So we already have a handful of Nissan Leafs and a handful of Volkswagen ID4s, for example. And we'll be super excited when we get Ford F-150 electric trucks coming out of the Memphis plant. The last thing I'll touch on is a little bit of our consumer awareness. If you haven't seen it yet, check out TVA's social media or go to energyright.com/EV to check out our consumer awareness video series. So this is a 5-part video series where we take a different electric vehicle to a different city with a different sort of local celebrity and just talk about that vehicle and show, kind of how it works in your community and what's going on in your community with electric vehicles. Our last video was at Bristol Motor Speedway, where Trevor Bain, the youngest winner of the Daytona 500, drove an electric Porsche around Bristol and did some drag racing. And we had a lot of good reaction for that video. So check it out. We're looking at kind of a season 2, maybe coming to the Memphis area and looking for, to engage the community there as well. So the last little section of this, I'm going to talk about what this means for sort of economic development and the companies that are in the automotive supply chain. And I'll give a shout out to my boss, Ray Knotts, who has many years in the economic development group at TVA before coming to the program side, and really kind of his thoughts infused into this, given his history and experience working with the automotive supply chain. But we really think that the Tennessee Valley sort of has this whole circle of the EV value chain. So starting kind of in the upper right, EV charging, TVA is kind of the largest public utility in the nation. And we're working with our local power companies to build this charging network to encourage more folks to drive electric vehicles. And so, really trying to step into that charging world to help folks get over the range anxiety as they're thinking about buying an electric vehicle. And of course, that is underpinned by the TVA power system itself, having very economical, very reliable, and very clean electricity to power all these electric vehicles, including the adoption into the future. We hear a lot about, well, how are we going to charge all these electric vehicles? If everyone starts buying an EV, the power system is going to fail. We're going to have to build power plants here and more coal plants, and that's just not true. We look multiple times a year at EV adoption and how that plays into our annual 5-year, 10-year, 20-year planning cycle for how we're going to build the power system. And the good news is we have a very large power system as it is, and it takes millions of electric vehicles before you really equate to just 1% or 2% of the TVA power system. And we have lots of off-peak capacity to provide electricity to these electric vehicles. So we're really actually excited about more EV adoption, not worried about it. We plan for that every year, every cycle in the planning process. So if we have the charging, if we have the power, we really think that this is going to encourage more folks to come here and not only buy electric vehicles, but build their electric vehicles here. So a big component of that is the EV battery production itself. The battery is the most expensive component of an electric vehicle. So automakers are going to be very, very protective and cautious on who they partner with and being able that they can get enough batteries to go into all the electric vehicles they want to make. And so I'll talk a little bit about their strategy around that, but it's primarily lithium-ion batteries. A whole class of those batteries can be called kind of lithium polymer. So you mix in a different little compound or element here or there, and it's slightly different, but they're all in the lithium-ion family. That is really the underlying technology associated with electric vehicles today. And then once you have the batteries, you have the vehicles themselves. So we have a lot of great success right now with sort of the original electric vehicle, the Nissan Leaf in Smyrna, Tennessee. But also the Cadillac Lyriq being made in Spring Hill in the coming years, and the Volkswagen ID4 being made in Chattanooga. Again, this was pre-Ford announcement, which will be making the F-150 outside of Memphis. And we think more announcements are on the way. So what does that mean sort of in dollars and cents? Well, Tennessee is the #1 state in the Southeast for EV manufacturing. Once Spring Hill and Volkswagen Chattanooga and Ford Memphis get online, we may be the #1 state in the nation for EV manufacturing. We'll be fighting it out with California and Michigan for those top spots. But over 152,000 EVs have been manufactured in Tennessee since 2013. This represents a significant capital investment, a significant number of new jobs committed, and all of that. You can see the numbers there at the bottom of the screen. So electric vehicles are really assembly plants, and assembly plants are a little bit different than your traditional internal combustion vehicle plant. And so they're a little bit unique in the type of deal that they are. So it's really kind of multiple deals in one. So yeah, you have the assembly plant where they're actually going to be putting the vehicle together, but those are typically very closely related to their battery plant, the #1 most expensive piece that goes into the electric vehicle. You're going to see a lot of joint ventures, like your original equipment manufacturer OEMs, plus battery manufacturers, plus technology companies, plus etc. So it's really kind of a joint venture type deal. And since there are kind of multiple facilities in one, kind of a campus, if you will, a lot of these deals are coming with central utility plants. So kind of a central operator of the campus that is controlling everything across the campus, whether that be electricity use or steam use or natural gas use. And so really putting a lot of technology and investment into the campus itself and trying to make that as efficient as possible. You probably heard some of the announcement in the Ford announcement there that they're trying to waste nothing from that plant. So as the batteries are made on site, as the vehicles are put together on site, as they're bringing in renewable energy, it's trying to be a closed cycle almost. No waste, everything gets recycled, gets put back into either the batteries or the vehicles themselves. And doing this really in kind of a carbon neutral, carbon zero way. And a lot of that is your central utilities. These are huge infrastructure, huge investment. So your traditional, automotive, internal combustion engine plant was kind of like a 20 to 30 megawatt electric load. These new kind of campuses for EVs are 100, 200 megawatts. So these are, huge infrastructure investments in electricity, but also in water, also in natural gas. These are all larger than your traditional vehicle plants. The site requirements are different. A lot of folks are looking at these carbon-free and renewable goals and having some of that on site with the plant itself. So they're looking at large areas, lots of acreage. So part of that can be solar panels to bring in some of their renewables. So this really drives, bigger footprints as it relates to the carbon-free and what makes a good site is sort of changing. And so we see, change is inevitable with the suppliers. This is not a tomorrow thing, but as we started off this presentation with all the automakers making commitments over the next 5 to 10 years to more aggressively electrify their vehicles, we want to think about what does this mean for your suppliers to these OEMs. Some of the trends that we've definitely seen is more automation, way more automation in the past. As far as how the vehicles are put together, how the components are made for those vehicles. And really that means we need different skills and different training for the workforce of the future. How we get them into the academies for building electric vehicles is really having a solid foundation in some of the basic electrical components and automation and how you work on the production lines and things like that. The definition of perhaps tier 1 versus tier 2 versus tier 3 is changing. So some parts are, like I said earlier, being made on site. So battery suppliers and things like that. And so as we've seen some of the challenges very recently in the supply chain with things like microchips and how automakers are responding to that, trying to bring more components in-house on site so they're not susceptible to these supply chain challenges. It might change the definition. Is there even a tier 3 definition? Is that acceptable for automakers? Are they going to try to bring it closer and closer? We think consolidation will be common, including a lot of joint ventures. So you saw that in the Ford announcement, kind of bringing in their battery supplier of choice. And they are, a partner in this joint venture and having a plant on site. And so really kind of what does this mean for the existing industries out there that support our current automotive industry? Again, we don't want to kind of sound the alarm and, say the sky is falling, but these are questions that current suppliers might want to start thinking about. Do you make products that translate to the EV world? Are you just making exhaust systems? Well, exhaust systems and mufflers don't really transition very well to an EV world that has no exhaust system. Can you pivot to electric vehicle parts? Do you have, does your supplier have relationships and a transition plan? Are they thinking about this EV future? Have you even started these types of conversations? And so I'll give a shout out to the TVA economic development folks, and they are a resource for local chambers to have these kinds of discussions because they are out there talking with the Fords, the GMs, the Nissans, the Volkswagens, every day about what can we do to support you in this transition to electric. So I'll stop right there. I'll actually back up to this last slide and I'll look. I see some stuff flashing to see if we have questions, but we can also unmute and ask questions as well.
No. Thank you, Drew. I know we have gotten a lot of questions. If you would be willing to share your presentation, if so, you can give to Carolyn and we can share it around everybody.
Sure, absolutely.
See if we do have any questions. And I do have one. The cycle of I guess kind of the purchase cycle of an EV. My father used to always joke that, one car would get him about 30 years. So that was his cycle, but electric vehicles, what are the purchasing cycle on those?
Yeah, so the electric vehicle is kind of the main components inside of an electric vehicle, the biggest one being the battery. Those always come with a 8 to 10 year warranty against, a certain amount of degradation. So very comparable to, powertrain type warranties that you see from different automakers. So the question is, how long do the batteries last? Well, they at least last 8 to 10 years, or you get a new one under your warranty. But all of the data that we've seen is the ability for these vehicles to last a very long time. The battery manufacturers say that the car parts will wear out before the battery will wear out. So you're looking at very comparable to your traditional vehicles as far as longevity goes.
All right, thank you, Drew. And I don't see any other questions right now, but we'll get those questions to you, Drew. This was very insightful and very helpful to me. And I know a number of us as we really start to think about the transition to EVs. There's a lot of consideration there, so thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Carl Hartley, who's certainly no stranger to the Tennessee Chamber. Carl is a member of the Chamber's Board of Directors, the Executive Committee, and chairs the Tennessee Chamber Tax Committee. For those of you that know Carl, Carl has headed up a number of major tax initiatives in Tennessee on behalf of the business community. He is truly, I would say, an expert. He has testified before the Tennessee General Assembly on matters of franchise and excise, property tax issues, really anything that impacts the business community. Carl has been a tremendous resource and ally for the Tennessee Chamber. So with that said, I know Carl's going to talk a little bit about the economic development incentives that are out there for manufacturers. We hear a lot that these are probably underutilized by the manufacturing community, whether they may not know about them or the opportunities that they have as they look at expansions or employment. So with that said, Carl, with Baker Donaldson. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yes, good morning to everybody. Thanks for having me here, Bradley, and thanks for the introduction. The presentation by Drew and the presentation by Ed was certainly outstanding as far as I'm concerned. It just shows how resourceful Tennesseans are and how generous they are with respect to their time and effort in dealing with the Tennessee Chamber, as well as sharing with other members of the Tennessee Chamber their successes and their visions for our state, both in the EV area as well as in other areas as well too. And these are extremely good resources for all of our chamber members to utilize. And one other resource, one area of resources also that you need to consider are the state and local advantages that could be utilized by manufacturers, whether you are looking to expand in the state of Tennessee or one of your affiliates is looking to locate in the state of Tennessee. I suggest that you seriously consider a number of points that are beneficial to those particular companies looking to expand or locate in Tennessee that originate from the Tennessee Department of Revenue, the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, from TVA, from your local governmental organizations that could provide property tax relief in a number of ways. We're going to talk about some of those today. The topic as described in the outline was tax incentives, but I'm going to broaden that a little bit to incentives that are beyond just tax related issues. I will say this on the very front end. All of these incentives that we're going to talk about require a significant amount of paperwork. They require a significant amount of detail. And so I suggest that if you are looking to expand or locate an affiliate in Tennessee, please talk with your advisors regarding the particulars and the nuances of each of these incentives. I won't go over this again, but just remember all of these require a significant amount of detail. If you're going to consider an investment in your current facility, an expansion in your current facility, or you're going to ask one of your affiliates to actually locate in Tennessee, consider, first of all, before you talk with anybody, consider establishing what your story is. That is, you're going to locate in Tennessee, expand in Tennessee versus what? Perhaps locating across the state in Mississippi, perhaps going across the river into Arkansas. You want to have a story that you can describe to the Department of Revenue, the Department of Economic and Community Development, or others. That Tennessee is not your only place that you're looking at. You're looking at other areas as well. That gives you somewhat of a competitive advantage in bringing to bear some of the incentives that we're going to be talking about, especially from economic and community development. And I understand we have some representatives of ECD on the line with us today in this seminar, this presentation. And I shout out to all of those who do such a great job in making sure that our members and other companies also get the full benefit of what ECD can bring to the table. Let's talk about that just a minute. The economic and community development, we'll start with that department first, essentially has three basic programs that they utilize in order to assist companies looking to locate or expand in Tennessee. The first one is the Fast Track Jobs Training Program. In connection with that program, ECD typically requires at least hiring 25 employees over a period of 5 years. Now, I've seen a number of other situations where ECD has reduced that number to even as low as 15. But the point is, if you're going to locate or expand in the state and you're going to have a capital investment of a certain amount of money, whether it be hundreds of thousands of dollars or even in the millions, and you're going to have 25 or more new jobs that you're going to be creating, please consider talking with your consultants first before you reach out to ECD, so that you have a story that you can tell to ECD as to why you wish to locate here versus somewhere else. The training program that ECD offers, the Fast Track Training Program, is a direct grant from ECD to the company so as to have on-the-job training. This is the only one of the 3 grants that we're going to talk about today that is directly paid from ECD to the company for purposes of per employee in training on the job. There is a lot of paperwork in connection with this, but it is a very valuable component of the ECD arsenal of the resources that can provide to manufacturers looking to expand or locate in Tennessee. Another one of the important grants that resources that ECD is able to offer is what is called the Economic Development Grant. Unlike the training grant, this Economic Development Grant, if it's awarded, is just a upfront payment of money for site preparation, for building a manufacturing plant, or other types of qualified expenditures. It does not pay for purchasing equipment, but there are a number of other qualified expenditures that it does cover. And this money is paid not to the company, but paid rather to the local industrial development board, and which in turn uses that money to essentially assist the company in reimbursing for these costs for developing the building, the site preparation, whatever it may be, that are qualified costs. Tennessee is not able to provide, under the Constitution of the state of Tennessee, not able to provide a grant directly to a company and essentially giving money to a company outside training. Now, the outside a training issue is a different issue altogether, on-job training. But for just giving money to a company to reimburse it for development costs or building a building, it cannot do it directly. It has to go through the industrial development board of the local community where that company is located. So again, this requires a significant amount of effort in paperwork, coordination, discussion with not only your local industrial development board, but also with ECD. It's essentially a 3-party arrangement between the company, the local IDB, and ECD. But it can be extremely helpful. These economic development grants, I have seen them as low as $20,000, $25,000 to as high as millions of dollars. And so look at your own expenditures, what you intend to put in the ground as far as capital investment is concerned. If, for instance, you're going to be investing $10 to $15 million over a period of 5 years and you're going to be hiring 80 people, please talk with your consultants and then put your story together and go talk with ECD, some of the representatives on the line with us here today. Talk with them about what you intend to do and your options that are available to you outside of Tennessee, so that you get some competitive advantage in that discussion. One of the concerns I've always had is that when a company says, I'm going to expand in Tennessee, and announce I'm expanding in Tennessee, and then they go talk with the state about what can you help me with? Well, I mean, you've already announced you're going to be here. You're already announced that you're going to put the money in the ground here. Sometimes ECD, sometimes other departments are less willing to come to the table to assist you if you've already announced you're going to put capital in the ground and employ people in Tennessee. Think about the way that you want to sell what you're planning to do and the options that you have before you actually take that story and go talk with anyone inside the state of Tennessee. Separately, I want to talk about the infrastructure grant. ECD offers an infrastructure grant, which is similar to ED grant in the sense that it's not paid directly to the company. It's paid to local industrial development board, which assists in creating rail connections, off-ramp connections, sewer, and other types of connections that the company may need to incur in connection with the expansion of a location in Tennessee, but needs some financial assistance in doing that. There is, as I said, a significant amount of paperwork even with that. Their competitive bids are required in connection with seeking contractors so as to perform those activities. But the bottom line of all 3 of those, the training, economic development, and the infrastructure grant, is that despite all the paperwork, it can be a significant financial savings to the company, whether directly paid under the training or through the local industrial development board or other authorities that you have in your local community. It can be a reimbursement for those costs. So please give some thought to that as you are planning expansions or locations of affiliates. Let's turn to the Department of Revenue just a minute if we can. One of the main benefits that manufacturers and other companies also are given through the Department of Revenue statutes in Tennessee for franchise and excise tax purposes. And when I'm talking about franchise and excise tax, that's our business income taxes. Our excise tax is our main net income tax. Our franchise tax is our net worth tax. One of the main credits that the Department of Revenue offers is a jobs tax credit. Now, typically it requires 25 jobs to be committed and to be hired over a period of 3 years with health insurance being offered. Sometimes that can be reduced depending upon if the company is in a county other than a tier 1 or tier 2 counties. Tennessee, and just very briefly, Tennessee's counties are broken down into tier 1 through tier 4. Tier 1 is the typical metropolitan areas of Nashville, or the counties rather, Davidson, Shelby, Knox, Chattanooga, and several other counties throughout the state are tier 1s. Tier 2s are less metropolitan. Tier 3 and tier 4 are very rural, typically where there's not a significant amount of employers located, especially manufacturing employers. Both ECD and the Department of Revenue have the ability to provide more lucrative terms if your company is going to locate in a tier 3 or tier 4 county, in connection with both some of the grants for ECD as well as some of the tax benefits under the Department of Revenue. But the jobs tax credit can be a significant assistance in reducing your franchise and excise tax liability. It's typically $4,500 per job that you're going to be bringing on board during that 3-year time frame, assuming that you're going to invest a certain amount of money, a capital investment in the state during a time period of typically 3 to 5 years, depending upon the county that you're in, the tier county that you're in. Additionally, if you are in a tier 3 or tier 4 county, or if you're going to be any of these counties, but you're going to put a significant amount of capital, 10 million or more, in the ground, you can also get an additional credit in addition to the $4,500. Sometimes it's another $4,500, sometimes it's $5,000, but the combination of those can be a significant benefit to you in reducing down your franchise and excise tax liability. Those credits come with a lot of terms, a lot of conditions, but the point is they're available to you if you meet certain criteria. Another good benefit from the Department of Revenue is the industrial machinery credit. Excuse me. Industrial machinery is typically defined as machinery, apparatus, equipment that is used primarily and necessarily for the production of tangible personal property for sale off premises, essentially production equipment. Production equipment is somewhat loosely defined, but has been determined in many situations to be mostly production line and ancillary equipment to the production. The reason I make reference to that definition is because sometimes companies try to get the industrial machinery credit for things which are simply not industrial machinery, and that results in an audit as well as a deficiency notice issued by the Department of Revenue. But assuming that you are buying industrial machinery, then 1% of that cost can be used to defray up to 50% of your franchise and excise tax liability. It's important to note that the industrial machinery acquisitions, if you have any questions about them whatsoever as to whether this qualifies as industrial machinery, you can get a ruling from the Department of Revenue as to whether something will or will not qualify as industrial machinery on the front end before you acquire it. Both of those, that is the jobs tax credit and the industrial machinery credit, can offer a significant amount of benefit to the company with respect to the financing. Another benefit that came into play about 4 years ago is what we call the single sales factor analysis. Under the typical determination of how much tax is owed to Tennessee, you first have to determine how much tax base is attributed to Tennessee. In determining that tax base, you look at whether or not you have sales into other states, whether you have property or payroll in other states. And for decades in Tennessee, we have used what is called a three-factor formula to determine whether or not a company's tax base can be attributed or apportioned, as the phraseology goes, to other states, and therefore not taxed in Tennessee. You have major manufacturing companies located in Tennessee, and you have $50 million, $100 million, $500 million of capital invested in Tennessee, that three-factor formula can be very, very disadvantaged, or can create a significant disadvantage for that company because of the significant amount of payroll and property that you've got located in Tennessee. The percentages essentially are weighed in favor of Tennessee, notwithstanding that your sales may be 10% in Tennessee and 90% outside the state. A lot of those sales that are outside the state are going to be sucked into Tennessee in the tax base because of such a large amount of property that you have in Tennessee and such a huge amount of payroll that you have in Tennessee. Under the single sales factor apportionment formula that the chamber was instrumental in getting enacted in the legislature about 4 years ago, 2017, you can disregard the payroll, disregard the capital, and all you're looking at is the sales everywhere is the denominator, and sales in Tennessee is the numerator. Sales to customers in Tennessee is the numerator. And that percentage multiplied times your taxable income is the amount of income that's attributed to Tennessee. That's a very big benefit for manufacturers. No other company, well, one or two other types of businesses have that option of using the single sales factor, but primarily it's manufacturers. That's a huge feather in the cap of manufacturers in Tennessee to be able to use a single sales factor. Another benefit in Tennessee for manufacturers is that pollution control equipment is not included in connection with the computation of the franchise tax minimum measure. I won't go into the intricacies of what minimum measure means, but just take it for me that if you have to invest a significant amount in pollution control equipment, you're going to get a benefit in the computation of the franchise tax portion of the Tennessee franchise and excise tax. Separately is the Tennessee business tax. Separate from the franchise excise tax is the Tennessee business tax. It's a gross receipts tax. The percent it applies to your gross receipts. The percentages, the tax rates are very, very low, from 1/10 of 1% to 3/80 of 1%. Very low. Manufacturers are exempt from that tax. However, there are some ways that the Department of Revenue can still tax manufacturing production in Tennessee, which the Tennessee Chamber has been fighting that for years. And hopefully in the 2022 legislative session, we're going to be offering some legislative amendments to try to compromise that, essentially that gotcha situation. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a campus of buildings. The main building is building A, where all the production is taking place. However, when the finished products come off the end of the line, and I'm using a very simple example here, they go over to a building B, which is located on another street address altogether. When the company decides to sell those items, they are sold from company B, where those finished products are located. Now, the manufacturing plant itself is exempt from the business tax. And if those products were sold directly from that manufacturing floor, there would not be a business tax. However, the Department of Revenue interprets this to mean if they're sold from that warehouse that's at another street address, notwithstanding it's still part of your campus, then that location is taxable. It's not a manufacturing location, it's a warehousing location. We're trying to talk with the department about this issue. I've talked numerous times with Bradley and Ryan about this, and we're going to hopefully put some legislation together to try to rectify that problem. We have a huge problem like that here in Chattanooga, in fact, but we're going to try to address that in the 2022 legislative session. The Tennessee sales tax offers a lot of benefits for manufacturers. One, you can purchase industrial machinery, which I alluded to earlier as what industrial machinery is, free of the sales tax. Again, it requires paperwork, but the paperwork pales in comparison to the benefits that you get by complying with the laws in Tennessee so as to obtain sales tax, industrial machinery free of the sales tax. Industrial materials can be bought free of sales tax. That is, materials that you buy in order to run through your operations that either become a component part of the product that you're making or get used and consumed in the process of producing that part. Those can be purchased free of tax on a sale for resale or sale for further processing certificate. The last one that I want to talk about as far as the Department of Revenue is concerned is research and development. That a few years ago was added to the definition of industrial machinery such that it can be purchased also. The equipment, devices, apparatus for research, R&D can be purchased free of the sales tax. Paperwork is required here also, and you must look at the rules that have been issued by the Department of Revenue. Rule 128 specifies what is and what is not research and development. I believe some of those what is not is a little too restrictive. Hopefully over the next several years, we're going to get that one, those expanded also. But typically it's for those devices, apparatus, equipment that is used to essentially look at the ways that your products can be made better. Not making finished product, but ways that you can make your product better. That's just a simplified overview of what Rule 128 says. Look at it if you have any questions as to whether or not the equipment that you intend to purchase really is going to be free of the sales tax under that R&D exemption. Another area that I want to talk to you about briefly is the TVA. TVA has a significant investment credit program, but it's based also on how much capital you put in the ground, how much are you intending to spend, how many jobs you're going to be, excuse me, how many jobs you're going to be bringing over either a 5-year period or a 7-year period or a 10-year period, I'm sorry. And also the average wage is involved. Those three components, as well as others, make up a significant amount of importance in dealing with TVA for purposes of getting a credit against the electric bill that you're going to be charged either directly by TVA if they are direct serve to you, or more likely through a cooperative or other distributor that TVA sells to, and then that distributor sells directly to you. In those discussions, you need to talk directly with your distributor or co-op if you're dealing with a co-op, and directly with TVA. The information goes on an application for the credit incentive program directly to TVA. Then TVA will interact not only with you, but also directly with your cooperative or the distributor that deals directly with you if TVA is not a direct serve to your business. But you can save a significant amount of money on your electrical bill by going through this process. TVA is very, very well tuned to economic development, as Drew mentioned earlier. And so they know how to help incentivize you to locate an affiliate here or to expand here. And so they're very good at that. So please reach out to them as a great source. The last one I want to mention is talk to your local industrial development board. If you're going to be acquiring new equipment, if you're going to be utilizing new property, talk with them about the possibility of a payment in lieu of tax arrangement. This is a situation where you know the equipment that you acquire or the new property that you're going to be utilizing is transferred to the Industrial Development Board and leased back by you. That is, you lease the equipment or you sell the equipment to the Industrial Development Board and lease it back, or you sell the land to the Industrial Development Board and lease it back. And the rental amounts can be negotiated at a price which is typically lower than the property taxes that you would otherwise pay. In most communities, the school tax portion is never reduced. You're always going to pay that 100% through the rent. However, with respect to the other parts of the components of a local property tax, and there's several components to every local property tax, the other components, the rental amount can be as little as 15%. Sometimes it's zero for a couple of years. and then gradually moves up it over a period of time to 80, 90, 100% of what the rent or the property tax would be if you own the property directly. But the payment of lieu of tax arrangement can be a significant property tax saver for you. Again, a lot of paperwork involved, a lot of details are required, but in the end, it's a good financial benefit for you. So you have resources through Economic and Community Development, resources through the Department of Revenue, resources through TVA, and resources through your local community industrial development board. Please consider every one or more of those in connection with any development that you're intending to consider in Tennessee, either expansion or location in Tennessee. And please do not hesitate to contact Bradley if you need any further insights as to any of those. Bradley, there you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. This is Carolyn. I'm clearly not Bradley. You could tell that pretty quickly. But thank you so much. No, we did have a question come in online. I'll follow up with you directly. We're right about closing time, so just want to be respectful of that. But thank you, Carl, again. Your knowledge and expertise is invaluable to the chamber, both on the committees you serve and just in general. So we thank you for that. I just have a few closing comments. Bradley was having some connection issues, I think. So I'm going to wrap us up. And I'm Carolyn Davis. I know everybody in the room has met me, but if I haven't met you and you're online, thank you again for joining us. We do want to just thank our sponsors one more time, Walmart with Lasco products as well. Thank you again to Ed for speaking this morning. And then also LBMC, that is a silver sponsor of both roadshow events. Another huge announcement, I'm sure all of you have seen that potentially in the news already, but the Smart Factory Institute that is at Volkswagen in Chattanooga had the official grand opening on Friday, which was a huge, huge moment, not only for Tennessee, but for advanced manufacturing as a whole. So I know Denise is online, and congrats to you for a great grand opening event. And with that, I believe we will close out. This month is National Manufacturing Month, so please celebrate that with your companies and your communities, and we will see you all again soon. Thanks so much.